All right. Good evening. How are you? Join everybody here. I got Wyking Garrett of the Africatown Community Land Trust. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Big O. I'm good. Good to be here. Talk about some important things going on in our community and in the city.
Right. And just to let everybody know, we this turned out good, by the way. I'll let you know is that we were supposed to initially meet up on Friday. I know you had an urgent matter come up, but I did an impromptu like AMA, ask me anything kind of around the announcement, man, and got a lot of good questions and feedback from the community. So, all's well that ends well. I'm glad that you could join us here tonight. You know what I'm saying? This is clearly a hot topic, not only in our community, but across the city, as the mayor has announced this $100 million for at least, I don't know, this next year, what, the goal of having it go for 10 years, $1 billion investment into what she says is community. And we're going to get into a few things here, but to set the scene for people tuning in, want to go back to the morning update show on Friday, when we talked to the mayor and she made this announcement. Well, she put some more detail around the announcement, but we went back to our original interview on June 12th as well. So let's play this. This was Friday from the morning update show.
That starts with promising and delivering to community more investments. And I'm talking on the scale of, I think we need to invest at least $100 million a year for the next 10 years that goes back into community to invest in those institutions that we have underfunded for generations.
All right, Mayor Durkan, you put it out there, June 12th, you threw it out there, $100 million a year times 10 years, $1 billion. Man, what's the story? What's going on? Where are we at? I know the budget's coming out next week.
Yeah, the story is, and I even said it the weeks before that, and you'll see my budget next week, that we're going to start this process. It is really difficult times in the city of Seattle budget-wise, but we as a city and a nation have underinvested in the Black community, communities of color, Indigenous communities for generations. And we know what makes healthy, thriving communities. And it is time that we make true on our word. And so my budget will have $100 million that is allocated to a community investment fund. We're going to kick off a community task force that's going to have representatives from throughout the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, but they will the ones that will engage with community and determine how that money should be prioritized, what kinds of investments, about building community wealth, which you were talking about before. Is it healthcare? Is it economic justice? Is it educational justice? There's areas that we know that we have to really address. If you look at every one of the health determinants and the economic determinants for communities of color, we have fallen behind. And even today's newspaper talked about here in Seattle, the median income for whites in Seattle is over $100,000 a year. But for Black families, it's about $43,000 a year. We have got to change that. Kids growing up in South Park should not have a lower life expectancy than kids growing up in Laurelhurst. So this will be the beginning of a process. I want to find a way to make sure we have this level of investment over 10 years. And the other thing I want to say is, Omari, is I've worked really hard to fence off the usual tricks where government says, hey, here's a pot of money, but they just take it away from investments they're already making. We're not doing that.
All right, Wyking, what was your initial thoughts? I know you saw the interview. You knew that this $100 million was coming down the pipeline, but this was the first time that the mayor's really, spoke publicly about it. She has a press conference on Tuesday where she's going to put more meat on the bone. But I mean, you saw it live. What were your thoughts initially about that statement?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's, there was a lot of, statements that were made that I think were accurate analysis regarding the conditions that, Black people face here in Seattle, Martin Luther King County, but still facing this reality of Jim Crow apartheid, based on the statistics that she quoted. And so, to just set context, back in April 17th, to be exact, I sent an email to many of our elected officials, addressing the urgent need for a $1 billion fund for the Black community to acquire, develop economic development, to be able to, begin to have a real presence in the future of Seattle. on June 7th, the mayor announced that she was doing $100 million a year fund for the Black community. And reference that, there's a statement. And so when recently the language has changed to be BIPOC, which is a big difference, right? In terms of, if there's $100 million that's allocated to the Black community, we can, know that the $100 million is supposed to come into the Black community through whatever various organizations and programs and things of that nature, to be determined by, the needs in a quality needs assessment, which is really happening now. There is, surveys going out to community through King County Equity Now for a participatory budgeting process. But the language of $100 million to BIPOC, that's not clear, actually. That's very ambiguous, right?
Well, let me jump in here real quick, Wyking, because actually that's a question that Trey Holiday had brought up on the show on Friday, was that there was a previous statement. Actually, let me see this. We got a little bit of technology over here. We're trying to figure it out. Give me 1 second here, because I pulled this up earlier. Okay. And so this was the original announcement, is what you're saying here. Let me see if I'm able to. I know people watching are like, man, we'll get it together. This is what happens when I direct the show myself, though, too. So let's see. Here it is. Give me 1 second. So now on this, we'll scroll down here and I can highlight it. This was the original announcement, and it says invest in $100 million in community-driven programs for Black youths and adults. Didn't have that handy when we spoke to the mayor on Friday, but I did pull up the original, what we see. And then let me play this, because Treyana actually brought that up. Like, okay, was this, $100 million still for the Black community, or is it now BIPOC, because that's the term that's being used? And when we come back, maybe you can talk about like this Black BIPOC thing. Let's see.
Well, I have a question about the community, because June 7th, there was a statement that came out from you saying, I'm going to do this investment specifically in the Black community. And then later it was changed to BIPOC. And I want to understand the difference between the two, or what caused that shift, because we have understood that statistically, the numbers have shown that it's really Black families that are at the bottom of the scale. Really, it's like Black and Native families. I just want to hear from you what the change was there, because there was a direct statement saying investment into Black communities, and now it's really about this kind of BIPOC communities. And historically, we know that Black struggles, a lot of times they get co-opted. So I'm just wondering from you, what was the change in the shift there?
So I think there's been, from a number of communities, the sense of a range of people left behind. And if you look at, for example, in the pandemic, who has suffered most the health and economic consequences, it is the Black community and the Latinx community. And you look at the social outcomes and the graph that you're showing right now, the income by race. So I am interested in talking to people. It could be that the task force says, because of what you're saying, we are going to invest in the Black community and outcomes disproportionately. And we think that that's where we need to get the metrics, because we've looked at the facts, and we look at the fact, when I was growing up here, and Omari knows this better than I, 75% of the Central District was owned and lived in by Black people. Today, it's less than 14%. That kind of gentrification has not occurred in any other demographic. And the impacts of that, you look at what's happening in North King County and South King County, people are tied together. So we are going to really focus on how do we, this is in conjunction with cultural spaces. We announced this week, we sent down that Bird Bar Place now is owned by the community. The Senior Center is, we introduced that legislation together with Fire Station 6. We also have to look for those properties we can reclaim for community. So I agree with you completely that the Black community itself has got to be a focus of this, but I don't want to dictate that. I really believe that's got to come from the collective voice.
All right, Wyking. So what are your thoughts?
Well, one, I think, it was good that she was very clear about the challenges that the Black community has faced. And I think she also articulated that this is not by accident, but this has been a systemic exclusion of Black people from the growth of the city that has created this Jim Crow apartheid reality in Seattle. So $100 million to the Black community is very clear. $100 million to any community, the Asian community or the Hispanic community, is very clear. And when those specific resources are allocated to address the unique needs of communities, which have different needs, Black people have different needs based on our unique experience in this country, anti-Blackness being really the foundation of the country, and the exclusion of Black people and the exploitation of Black people to bring value to the land that was taken from the indigenous First Nations is really what built the wealth of the country and excluded Blacks. So when we're talking about specific remedies to the damages and harm that has happened to our community over centuries and generations and decades, then there's not a reason to have a multicultural panel to decide what happens for the Black community. I don't think that happens in any other community. And definitely $100 million allocated, as she said, on June 7th, and it's still on the website, for the Black community is clear. And we would like for the mayor to just, to keep her word on that. And because it's needed, and she explained why this is needed. To shift that to say BIPOC is very unclear. That means the Black community could get 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, indigenous, people of color, it gets real confusing, right? And a lot of times politics, we see bait and switch. What we don't want is a bait and switch, right? And I don't think anyone wants that, right? Right now, there's a movement for Black lives in America and globally, right? That's going on that we see very visibly every day. And there's Asians for Black lives, Hispanics for Black lives, people from all walks of life and different groups are being very specific that they're rallying for Black lives. Now, there are many other issues that need to be addressed in the society, in this city, to make it equitable, to remedy past harms and transgressions, but you can go one by one and address those specific issues, or expand the resource pool. There's a lot of, this is one of the wealthiest regions, cities, metropolitans in the country, if not the world, right? So the resources are here, and we just need the political will again to change this Jim Crow apartheid reality that exists, and build a new normal that is rooted in equity, to ensure that there are Black people in future. Because right now we've seen the statistics, right? You put them on the screen. There was the wealth statistics that came out, a couple of days ago in the Times that showed white families have almost $500,000, more wealth than Black families here. And so the trajectory right now is that there won't be Black people, and the Black people will have basically zero equity in Seattle. And so to change that trajectory, we have to have bold, unprecedented investments in our community to balance out the scales of injustice that have been done economically over generations. And that was a bold, I thought that was a bold start when she announced that on June 7th. And I think, the key thing is to just, let's make sure that we don't have a bait and switch situation, and, trying to pit other communities,
Well, let me jump in here because, on the AMA we had the other day, one of the big things that came up is people being, basically, at least I don't want to see is people in our community lose their dignity and their humanity fighting over $100 million if that amount in total goes over there. And especially, money means nothing if there's not a change in systems, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's the big thing for me is like, man, there's something that we need to avoid. That I think there's already a lot of fractures in the community. I don't think we want people actually like fighting over, this small amount of money.
I agree. Again, our call is for $1 billion fund. It's not really 10 years. It's $1 billion fund that needs to be seeded now. It's not just, I wouldn't say it's just a city, but there's county, there's private, there's philanthropy, there's, a variety of sources that can seed this fund so that we can acquire, and develop the land and do the community economic development to make sure that, again, there is a Black community in the future. I mean, when you really look at Black people have been in the city for almost 140 years before Washington was even a state. It was still just a territory, right? And William Gross was a developer in 1882. He was building hotels and restaurants. He bought the land that established the Central District as a settling place for Black people when he apportioned his land. And in 2020, can you show me a Black developer of scale in Seattle, in this region, as we're striving to build the projects that we're working on? We can't find general contractors of scale, right? A general Black-owned general contracting firm of scale, an architecture firm of scale that can, take on projects of this size, right? And that's 140 years later. You would think just by being here, we would have had, participated in the growth, have a stake, right? We would have a stake 140 years later, unless there was some type of systemic inclusion, which Mayor Durkan spoke to, that there has been, which really.
Well, actually, I've got that. Hold on, let me pull this up here. I've got that clip.
Reinforce what was said in HB 1918, which is, really common knowledge, but sometimes you have to, it being documented. People take it more seriously, right? So this is the reality, and in order for Seattle to move forward, and be a city that realizes the rhetoric around social justice and shared prosperity and equitable development, things have to be done differently, and investments have to be specific and targeted to solve the problems that they're approach to, seeking to solve.
Right. I wanted to, I like I said, I'm glad we did this show Friday. I got so much feedback. I put together something here. It's just a few photos, courtesy of the Black Heritage Society of the state of Washington. Big shout out to Stephanie Johnson Tolliver, SJT, on it. Because, sometimes seeing is believing. And I'm going to just play this here. This is 75 years ago. This is Gideons Pharmacy and Soda Fountain right there on 21st and 22nd in Madison. And so 75 years ago, I mean, look at the counter right here. I mean, we had, pharmacies in our neighborhood, soda shops in our neighborhood, ice cream shops, bookstores in our neighborhood, and everything else. And Mr. Gideon, Russell Gideon, also was a founder of the East Madison Mardi Gras, which is now a Moja Fest, 70 years old. Basically, that festival is. But I just thought I'd throw a glance in there for people to see, because oftentimes we're like, man, the CD used to be this, it used to be that, but people don't have any context.
Correct.
And that's just one set of photos right there. So when we talk about, it was economic, self-contained, the economic driver there in the Central District. And that's when we talk about when House Bill 1918 addresses is how, the system was basically targeted, into the CD. Let me play this clip right here with Mayor Durkan, where we talk about the same thing with House Bill 1918 and the system working for some communities and against.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Mayor Durkan. When you talk about the systems were designed to hold people back, very interesting. Last year, the state legislature unanimously passed House Bill 1918, signed by Governor Jay Inslee, which says just that the African-American community in the Central District was systemically targeted through laws and policies of what's led right there. And House Bill 1918, passing both houses unanimously even means that a lawmaker in Okanagan County and in Franklin County, in Spokane, the whole state unanimously sees what was systemically what happened there in the Central District. And I bring that up, Mayor Durkan, because I tell people all the time that it's not that this system is broken, ma'am. It's that this system doesn't work for us. This system is very efficient. Like you just said, when you're on the inside of the system, it works well. The problem that we face here, ma'am, is not only are we not in the system, but also we get targeted by the system. man, what is it that you are going to do beyond this $100 million, the commitment that you're making? What is your larger commitment to ensure that this system finally works for Black people in this city?
So I think the first thing that I and everyone have to do is acknowledge and admit that exactly what you said is true. It's not that the system didn't work. It's that it worked exactly like it was designed. It was designed to benefit certain people and exclude certain people. And it was done for generations. And so we have to look at ways, look at our contracting. When Initiative 200 passed, which I worked really hard against, it changed and turned upside down the access that Black contractors had to contracts. And you saw statistically what happened to so many middle American jobs in the Black community in Seattle from that. So we're looking at ways, because we now have things like the bill that passed in Olympia, we have proof of the systemic disparities, and that gives us the ability to correct them. And so we're working hard to say, how do we look at our own contracting to make up for that? And we used to call it affirmative action, but that sounds like it's a favor. This isn't a favor. This is actually having an equitable playing field. And it's something that we have a duty to do, an obligation to do. And we have just, for too many generations, America has not only failed to promise, it has put systems in place that have made sure that promise can't come true.
Wyking, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, she said it clearly there. I think that the way you move it forward is you focus your investments again to remedy the problem. Mayor Durkan is a very experienced litigator, federal prosecutor. She knows the law very well. So she also understands that when damages have been done, there's an assessment of what type of damages happen. And then there's, a remedy, right? There is compensation to make whole the damaged party, so, she and HB 19 and many other studies have demonstrated the harm that has been caused to our community, the marginalization that's still continuing now. And what has to happen is, again, the remedy, the repair, the reparation, right? The repair ration. And we don't fix it by awarding, resources to repair to an injured party and then say, well, this is for you and other people that have been injured in other situations and circumstances as well. That I've never seen that, happen when, again, there has been a conclusion, damages have been done, and then there is an assessment and a repair or compensation to make whole, and then you just give the resource to repair to multiple, to just any other place, right? So I think the key thing here is just for Mayor Durkan to stay consistent with her initial statement, proclamation that this $100 million, and again, this is really not going to solve all of the problems. She said it was for programs. There is still the need for the fund. Is what we say, build Africatown fund. I mean, Africatown. We're honored to be able to continue the legacies of people like Dr. Gideon with the Emoji Fest, continuing the legacy of East Madison Mardi Gras Parade. And then again, you showed the pharmacy. Well, where's the pharmacy today? You would think that the pharmacy has expanded as the community has grown, as buildings have become bigger. You would think that the things that we have in the community would have also become bigger. Like Nordstrom's has become bigger, from being a shoe shine stand to a shoe store to a multinational corporation. You would think that we would have some growth, at least to just be able to have a viable community in Seattle, in the Central District, where we've been for 140 years. But we have not found that the case, and we know that that's due to the things that Mayor Durkan and many others have outlined just in the the clips that you have demonstrated in the interview, which I thought was a very good interview. So thank you to yourself and ConvergeMedia for bringing that to the community. So yeah, I think, it's very clear. The $100 million to Black community, let's stay consistent with that. And then let's continue to build. We still need the fund to acquire, like programs come and go. We have to have, land and space for our community to actually grow and thrive and be a part of the future of Seattle. And that's what we have to look at, the statistics. If the city is growing, what is the trajectory, right? Again, 140 years, what stake does the Black community that's been here have in the city, right? Do we own buildings downtown? Do we have commercial buildings? Because William Gross did back in 1882. He was a part of rebuilding after the fire, played an instrumental role in financing and helping the recovery after the Great Fire. How many buildings do Black people own downtown? How many skyscrapers? How much port space? Port drives the whole economy. How much, manufacturing space? How many corporations of significant size, even nonprofits of significant size after, 14 decades, 140 years? What is the stake? So even when we're just talking about maintaining the little bit of residential, primarily land that Blacks were reserved to in the Central District through the housing covenants, and now that's being raided. So what does that mean for the future? In the future, if we continue at this trajectory, which is being facilitated by many of the policies that are incentivizing predatory development in the community, we won't have a state, right? And I don't think that's the city that we're hearing that people are talking about in the future. So we need to align, again, the reality, the investments with making sure that, if Seattle is going to be a world-class city, it is inclusive of the communities of the world that have helped make the city. And clearly Black community has been here, again, for almost 140 years. And I think the systemic things to keep us out and put us on and suppress our growth and disenfranchise economically, now is the time to begin to right those wrongs. And I heard a lot of talking about, her saying, we're looking at, actually they've been looking at, for 50 years, there's been studies. There is no group that's more studied in America than Black people, right? There is no group. There's so many studies, so much research that keeps coming out saying the same thing, keeps showing that we're at the bottom of most of the good statistics, such as, educational achievement, enrollment at the University of Washington, home ownership, business ownership, and we are at the top of the negative statistics, school suspension, school to prison pipeline, poor health indicators, et cetera, et cetera. And I do want to say that, it's a testament to the resilience of our ancestors and just us here that we are here to even have this conversation, right? And so we know that we're not leaving it up to the system, right, to fix itself, but the system does have an accountability. As people are citizens, people do pay taxes, people have invested into, what this city has been. And I think we have to have, again, policies enacted that balance the scales. And there's a big opportunity. The challenge presents big opportunity. So those are some of the thoughts, right? Now is the time.
Right. So what we'll do right here, I'm gonna just take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you. I guess there's quite a few people from the community who were asked to be on this task force, but then ultimately decided against it. We'll talk a little bit about that and then some of the next steps.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
ConvergeMedia produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you.
All right, we're back. I gotta remind people, man, we operating off of donations over here, man. You know what I'm saying? Anything people could do, support Black media. You know what I'm saying? We on it. Want to come back to you, the process, the task force. I think that's where a lot of people are having a sticking point here is around well, maybe there's a few sticking points, but around the task force, who's going to be on the task force. It came out, Dan Beekman in the Seattle Times actually wrote an article on Friday. Sean Good was asked to be on the task force. My co-host, Treyana Holiday, part of Africatown Community Land Trust, was asked to be on the task force. I don't know who else. I'm sure that all that information will come out on Tuesday at the mayor's press conference. But it seemed like what Sean Good was saying, and he listed 3 things, we'll talk about that, and what Trey Holiday said is that people were looking for more participatory process. And I think that what Sean Good had actually said was something like he thought that he was going to be invited to bake the cake, or at least, help select the ingredients. But at the end of the day, it turns out that all he was being asked to do was be the icing on the cake. Maybe you could talk a little bit about this process, the at least that you know of, or your thoughts about it, of the task force selection.
I have no idea about the selection process. What I do know is that the community, and shout out to, all of the hardworking people through, King County Equity Now, Decrim Coalition, which represents a wide, number of community organizations, stakeholders, et cetera, are actually have a participatory budget process in motion, very robust. Expertise, Black brilliance, Black excellence, in terms of researchers, professional researchers have designed a process to maximize community voice in the process. And that's happening. And I would encourage the mayor to, participate and support that process rather than, creating, I guess, confusion about, how do we get the vote? Let's go direct, right, to the people. There's been an old normal way of just, selecting, a couple people or a few people to sit at a table that, makes it difficult for them to get back. And so this is a process. There's surveys out. There's people at events. There's robust distribution of the surveys online. People are going into barbershops. People are going into hair salons, lifestyle locations, restaurants, putting this information in so that the community, again, voice. And I encourage people to, really fill out the surveys, right? Because that is your voice. And for the city and the mayor and other stakeholders to really, allow it to be a community-led process. She said that she wants a process that's guided by the community. And there's been a very robust process designed and is currently being implemented through many community stakeholders that are working, have been working, and in touch with community members to participate. And if people have not been connected with that yet, you can go to kingcountyequitynow.com and get connected with that certain participatory direct, get your voice directly into the process, right?
All right. So, let me tighten it up here. You know what I'm saying? In the sense that, okay, King County Equity Now, you represent, you're at Africatown Community Land Trust, you're part of King County Equity Now. But I mean, how is it that King County Equity Now can sit out here and say that they're talking for the robustness of community? Me, man, I'm like, whose community is? I told the mayor the same thing. It's, community is a vague term. Who is King County Equity Now actually representing?
Right. Well, I don't think it's just about King County Equity Now speaking for. I think there are many organizations that are on the ground, have been on the ground and do reach community. I mean, there's probably, 50,000 people in that email spread by now. But again, it's going directly to, again, barbershops, lifestyle locations, robust distribution across, social platforms to get people into the process, whether you're affiliated with one of those organizations that are a member or not. Right? You don't have to be a member to have your voice heard. So it's not speaking for. The community will be speaking directly for themselves through the process. It'll be their information. So you go on and you put, where is the community need? What is the best recommended solution that you've seen, that you're aware of, that you propose to address the immediate needs of our community, particularly coming through the COVID experience, also just in the context of being systemically excluded for decades and generations. So yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity. It's much more robust than 20 people around the table. I think that'll speak for itself. The number of surveys that are submitted, and I am definitely thinking that it'll be in the thousands, right? And we could use anyone that's tuned in. Go get the survey, right? Because then no one's speaking for you. You're speaking for yourself, right? And so that's the idea.
All right. Just one or two more.
I mean, I encourage you to have folks that have designed the process come on and explain and articulate. They can make great presentations.
Well, that's what I want to do. I mean,
hey, this is the process. This is how we get to the person who is getting their hair done at Earl's Barbershop or Jay Styles Barbershop, or Taco's Hair Salon, or the person who is going into Emerald City Fish and Chips, or going into Island Soul, or Simply Soulful, right? Into Ezel's, right? How do you get this information in front of them? And that's really, in my mind, reaching the broadest amount of our community. How do you get it into the churches, right? How do you get it into wherever we are, meeting the people where they are, rather than trying to have them come to an event, or even just, again, you have 12 people. How many people are supposed to be on this task force? And it's also not focused just on our community, but the initial announcement of the resources was for the Black community.
All right. So, I mean, you answered somewhat more on the survey and the data collection side. So thank you. My initial question, I probably didn't phrase it as directly.
I don't know if I did it justice, because I'm not.
They are
PhD. This is what they do.
That's what I'm saying, is that one, I'm gonna follow up with you on that, because our viewers want to hear this methodology, how it's put together, and everything else. So that's all good. We'll follow up on that, and I appreciate you throwing that out there. See if we can get somebody for this week who can come on and talk about how this data collection, data aggregation, and segmentation. My question for you though was that what is it that King County Equity Now is representing, to where King County Equity Now feels comfortable saying that they're representing a good portion of community? Because I mean, this is a question we throw out to everybody. It's like, oh, okay, well, man, who are you representing? Who knows you? I mean, when I talk to people down at City Hall, I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, 30,000 people coming out for Juneteenth is people that were there listening to the message that King County Equity Now. I mean, it's probably through the just the events over the summer. It was probably 50,000 people. We're talking about probably 100,000 people being in the streets from June 5th through August. Saying in support, in solidarity with, not just coming to a forum to hear, let me see what this person is saying and see if I support. These are people who are coming out saying, I support, we support, Black-led, community-led entities, community passageways, Wanawari, Choose 180. The list is, Africatown has been bringing people, to the table, right? And many other groups, some that are not formed as a name, Village of Hope, Black Prisoners Caucus, Nurturing Roots Farm, Black Power Epicenter, CD Panthers. So I think, traditional, non-traditional, really reaching out to have a pulse. And again, if anyone thinks that there's other places or parts of the community that are being missed, send the information directly in and you will be responded to. You will be engaged, right? This is not, any, only one or two or three. The network is expanding, right? It's beyond, it's expanding even beyond King County, as people are saying, yes, we like to see the Black organizations actually in communication, in collaboration, in solidarity, so that we can't be siloed up in the ways that we have been before, right? And that if there is an issue, we can easily communicate it and seek to address it internally to the community. And again, that was not an exhaustive list. I didn't come with a list because I actually didn't come to really explain that process. We're a member. We're not running every detail of it, but I definitely think that more people can speak to what is happening through King County Equity Now coalition and the many community-based organizations that are participating and supporting that and reaching out. So,
all right, well, you
not represented, reach out. Let's
yeah, you're gonna have to connect us with people. I mean, the thing is, Wyking, is I'll tell you this. Something that I'm seeing happening in our community and even beyond our community right now is there's so many people that are engaged and man, they just want to learn about stuff. You see what I'm saying? Like people are kind of over the sound bites, and so I mean, it's like these conversations is really building. So yeah, I want to talk to the person who gets the data. I want to talk to the person who's the formalization of whatever. I'm sure we'll catch up after this, and you can send me the contacts. Yeah. I wanted to throw this one. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
On just just on the social media, there's 16,000 there. There's 7,000 on Africatown. We're always coming on to your platform as to talk directly to the community on a regular. Been doing that since June, so I think that you reached so many people in the community, right?
Hey, we're trying, man. We're trying. We're building.
It's been a very, I think, open book. Our agenda, the issues, the platform has been present. KingCountyEquityNow.com since June 5th, right? You can go and see these are the things. If you have a difference in opinion, we're saying Black people need land. We need space to live. We need access to ownership. We need access for businesses. We need access for cultural organizations. We need to address the education issues. So there's very robust communication and strategies that are being put forth. The folks that are working to take people out of the school to prison pipeline, right? On the front end and interrupting when someone's in it. People like Community Passageway, Creative Justice, United Better Thinking, right? These are members, right? These are folks that are working on these issues and not just started May 29th when George Floyd was murdered, but let's just think of No New Youth Jail Coalition. That's 8 years, right? When you talk about making sure that Black people have a stake in the future, Africatown has been at the vanguard, at the forefront of changing the narrative, changing the conversation. The narrative in 2014, 2015 was that the Central District is gone, Black people are gone. Let's focus on, mitigating displacement in Chinatown, in the International District, and in South Seattle with, the immigrant and refugee population. Black lives did not matter. They were not part of the conversation. You look at the Seattle 2035 plan. This is why we initiated the Black Seattle 2035 plan, so that we could write ourselves into the future. And through that process, many of our other stakeholders, churches that own land, are now saying, no, we want to hold on to our land and develop. And that's what we wanted. Africatown is not going to develop all of the land. Africatown is not going to run all the business. Africatown is not all of the programs, but we have created an environment, right, that is a little more conducive. We're still not there. We still have a long ways to go to make sure that we have a significant, vibrant, viable community in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years. We know the community. She said 75% to 14%. What is that? That's ethnic cleansing, through economic means. I mean, you spoke about the businesses. You showed us Mr. Gideons. There was Gideons Pharmacy. There's so many. There were the Black Front Co-op. There was Liberty Bank. There's been so many institutions in our community, right? Central Area School Council, where our community had its own school council to address our issues. CAMPI, the early childhood development program that was successful long before early childhood development was the end thing. This was working, but it got defunded. It was working so well. So many times when our things work well, they get defunded, right? I don't think that's by accident. So as we move forward, we need to, again, make sure that the policies and the resources are allocated in a way that addresses these things, right? And if anyone is, thinks that we should be going in another direction, they should present a vision, right? They should present a plan, that will bring us into the future, right?
Well, so although I'm always thinking and aspiring of what Converge could and will ultimately be. I know that we're just, a real small platform in the city. So I don't have any expectation of anybody who has brilliant ideas for community to always just come here, right? But that being said, is that I'm not really seeing, I've been wanting to talk to everybody. I get heat from people because they be like, oh man, you talk to a Proud Boy, or you talk to this. I talk to everybody because I want to understand everything. And I'm wanting more if people for other opinions, because this is the time. I think that this is the time. Really, a while ago was the time, but even now this is the time. I want to see if somebody else has another platform. Clearly King County Equity Now has been very robust in getting all your stuff out there. You've got hundreds of different organizations now that have endorsed King County Equity Now. And, if there's a counter, counter proposals, I think it would be interesting to see that, at least on our platform, because we haven't really seen it.
Right. This didn't just start in this moment. This has been a movement, right? We've convened brilliant Black architects, urban planners around the Africatown Design and Planning Committee that did deep work, right, to formulate Africatown Equitable Development Framework, which has guided projects like the Liberty Bank building, now Africatown Plaza, which also led to, in collaboration with organizations like the Race and Social Equity Task Force, which is multi-community, the Community Preference Plan, which actually acknowledges that these systemic issues have happened, and that in remedy for that, people who have endured that, members of this community that have endured that, who have been displaced or are vulnerable to being displaced, can be prioritized in new developments as they come forward, right? This is work that has been done. So so I think a person should, also, say why it's qualified, right? Where is this coming from? We've had Black elected officials. We've had, organizations that are speaking for the Black community for generations, right? There was many opportunities to prevent what has happened, right? To provide a vision, right? There's a saying, where there is no vision, the people perish. We have not had a vision. A vision wasn't passed on to our generation. Institutions were not passed on for us to continue, right? To build on in the same way as we see with, again, as I showed, Nordstrom's and other things have grown in this environment at the same time that we've been here, right? So we had to almost create something to stop the bleeding, one, and two, provide a bridge to the future that makes sense. That's actually practical, right? These are not far out concepts. These are things that are actually happening and have happened for other communities already, right? So again, as I think we invite, bring our best ideas, bring our brilliance. Our brilliance is powering so many corporations, powering government, powering, nonprofit organizations. We need that brilliance to come empower our community, at the same time. And so we invite more people to bring forth visions, solutions. We need all our brain power working to solve the problems that we face so that we can, again, ensure our next generations better opportunities, a more solid foundation than we have had, right? And so I think it's a big opportunity, right? When we look at Africatown, a thriving, Black community where the beauty, the brilliance, and the best of our community is able to grow and prosper as being the product of many people having success, not just an entity that may have the Africatown name, right? So that we want all of our businesses to succeed. We want our organizations to grow in solving our problems. We want community that owns property to keep their property, develop their property, right? We're at the forefront of these things, working with others like Keep Your Habitat, Ruby Holland, again, Wanarai presenting innovative solution on how to repurpose property, as cultural space, right? To have hubs where we can come back, right? So these things are not in a silo of 10 or 15 people. This is based on broad outreach, conversation, communication, and then concentrating, aggregating those solutions into a platform or a plan to move us forward into the future.
All right. One last thing here I wanted to pop real quick before I let you go is that the mayor brought up Fire Station 6 during the interview. And so I want to play this clip, and you can basically tell us where you guys are at Fire Station 6 and what the ultimate vision for Fire Station 6 is.
Speaking of Fire Station 6, we got a clip here of you back on June 12th.
But what I've heard from community more on some other properties that people really want turned back to the community. And so I think we have to have all those conversations with, Fire Station 6, the Central Area Senior Center. Those are places that need to be rooted in and returned to community.
So, Mayor Durkan, where exactly are you in this process of returning to community? As you know, Fire Station 6 it's been 6-7 years, in this process. So, I mean, what process have you actually made, or your office or the city has made, to keep that promise, the discussion that you had right there on June 12th?
I think we're done. We sent down to council legislation to return both of those properties. Central Area Senior Center will be ownership and a deed, and Fire Station 6, and working with Africatown and others, there's a 99-year lease together with support for other improvements.
All right. What's the story? You guys almost there? And if that's the case, then what's going to be the next steps? And what's Fire Station 6 going to look like a year from now, or whenever you get it all the way up and running? Great
question. So yes, we've been working on repurposing the former Fire Station 6, decommissioned Fire Station 6 on 23rd and Yester, since as an innovation hub to connect our community with the innovation-based economy that's grown around us. We know that creativity, innovation, the entrepreneurial spirit has been deeply rooted in the Central District, in the Black community, in the Black experience, just resilience, having to make a way out of no way. But again, based on, just as the mayor outlined, there's been systems in place that has prevented that same genius, that same brilliance, that same spirit from being able to fully access economic mobility, right? And economic sustainability and growth. And so this is what we looked at the opportunity, or the highest and best use of Fire Station 6 as, not just a place for, they say, one program, but a place that incubates things that grow and then again populate the community, go out and grow and produce more. So that in 2015, that was brought into the Equitable Development Initiative of the Seattle City as a part of the Seattle 2035 plan, after we went through, the Black Seattle 2035, our own planning processes to, again, disrupt what we saw in the Seattle 2035 plan initially, which didn't include us. So this became one of the initial demonstration projects, along with projects in the Chinatown International District, South Seattle. So since 2016, it was actually voted in by City Council. And it's just been dragged out, in terms of us getting ownership, getting access to activate. So we've lost a lot of, just time, just the building sitting there, not bringing any vitality, vibrancy, culture, economic opportunity to community, being a blight, right? And so just in June, the mayor announced that they are gonna, finally transfer that. And since that time, we've been working with the city departments, Office of Planning, Community Development, Office of Economic Development, and other city departments to move this forward. And as of last week, it was sent to the city council that the initial access to the property will be facilitated through a long-term lease with the ownership transfer, which is connected to these mutually offsetting benefits that, the Bird Bar Place, former Camp Build Fire Station, and Central Area Senior Center, having programs already active in those spaces, have already met, right? And so in order to get in immediately so that we can begin to provide services and resources to the community from that space, this is the process that has been outlined. But it is about ownership, and that needs to be, again, pushed forward and accelerated, that the actual transfer of title and deed comes to the Black community. At the same time, we need to activate, get in there. We're going to, through this process, we'll be able to make the tenant improvements so that we can get it up and being used in a phase one use, which will not include the full building, because there is significant tenant improvements that have to happen, and that's going to happen in phases, so that, again, the building won't be sitting there until all of that is completed over time. So right now, as of last week, it went to City Council to approve us getting access so that it can be activated as the William Gross Center for Cultural Innovation and Enterprise, that, again, will be focused on harnessing, cultivating, and resourcing the creative, the innovative, the entrepreneurial energy and businesses that are in our community that are aspiring to make sure that we can have a greater participation in the economy and these different sectors that are around us. That's the focus.
All right.
That's not enough. The point of that is to, again, have an epicenter as we build out an ecosystem so that we can have our Africatown Cultural Innovation District, right? We don't just want to be a historic district where there's like plaques. So Jimi Hendrix used to be here. Quincy Jones went to school here. Here's a mural here. We want living institutions. We want people having access to the resources. So the young creative Quincy Jones, the young creative, Ishmael Butler, the young creative Jacob Lawrence, Octavia Butler, Chakundi Salisbury with C-Spot, G Prez. I mean, so many entrepreneurs have access to, really scaling up the businesses and really getting greater access. And that's going to take up more resources, more partners. So again, this is just the beginning of building out a position, a space for us to, again, have a future that's viable in Seattle and in the Central District.
So I got one last question for you here, but I would tell you, you might want to do some kind of AMA here, man, about Africatown, what Africatown is, fire stations. It's a lot of questions that are coming in here. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have the time to put them up. I know you got a time crunch as well, but people have a lot of questions, very interested in Africatown. Like, man, is it a location? Is it a concept? Very interested about Fire Station 6. Maybe that's something else we can catch up with on another time, because clearly the public has interest in that. My last thing is
about the William Gross Center for Cultural Innovation. If there's people out there that have skills, have resources, that want to help connect, facilitate, advise, and bring, again, their skills, talents, resources to, again, connecting the brilliance in our community with greater opportunities that are around us, please tap in. You can, reach out, africatownlandtrust.org. The work that's been happening at Black Dot, that's, putting out, so far almost over, 40 businesses have just been supported through the COVID period of time. Significant, programming around helping people apply for other resources, the loans, providing generational wealth strategies, Mastermind Mondays through Black Dot again. So there's robust programming happening, and always an open door for people that have something to contribute to, again, building a more equitable Seattle, an inclusive, and making sure that we're able to participate and be sustainable in the future of the city and the region.
Right. Last question here. So the mayor, she's having a press conference on Tuesday, I believe, what the official rollout of this. She's gonna put some meat on the bone, so to speak, about a lot of these details that right now people are pending and everything else. What are you gonna be looking for on Tuesday out of this announcement? What are some of the information, the data points around her program rollout that you're gonna be interested in learning more about?
That's a great question. One, I would just say the data point, again, $100 million committed to the Black community needs to remain committed to the Black community to address all of the things. That's just a start, to address the things that she spoke to eloquently in terms of past practices, damages, exclusion, systemic, racism, et cetera, right? So that's the primary point, is that let's get back to what was said on June 7th, right? $100 million into the Black community. There are other needs across that spectrum of BIPOC. Bring the resources to address that as well. But let's not bait and switch, what was said on June 7th in response to the movement for Black lives, right? And confuse that issue, right? And create chaos around what can we actually expect, right? So that's the primary point that I would like to stay focused on, and that people should encourage and, email and express again, their support for Black lives, for Black community. In order for Black lives to matter, Black communities have to matter, right? And we are facing extinction in Seattle, right? So if we want to course correct, we can't do that by, allocating resources to the problem and then dispersing those resources among, we don't even know what that data point would look like. But we know with $100 million to the Black community, we know it has to be somewhere in the Black community, right? And so that's what we're looking for first. I want to stay focused on getting us back and getting the mayor, back to that commitment. And I think that the thing she lays out, I think that was good, in being explicit and being clear. And we have to be just as clear and just as consistent when she says $100 million for the Black community goes to the Black community and does not get switched to BIPOC, which is very ambiguous.
All right, Wyking Garrett and Africatown Community Land Trust. We're going to keep our eye on the process. Appreciate you coming on. And man, let's see what happens on Tuesday. And, I'm sure I'll be checking back in with you.
Absolutely. We look forward to it. Again, we have a historic opportunity, and we just encourage everyone to tap in, don't tap out, right? We are all people. People make the world go round. Let's, if you're aligned with this, having a more equitable city for real, changing that apartheid numbers, apartheid, the root word is apart. And we've seen the white at 105, we've seen Black at 42, that is apartheid. So if you want to change that, tap in, don't tap out. You can reach out, africatownseattle.com, black.seattle.com if you're interested in business, supporting Black business development. kingcountyequitynow.com are all places where you can tap in and make sure that you're helping to shape, design, and build the future that you think that we should have.
All right, Wyking Garrett, peace.
Peace.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
ConvergeMedia produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you.